You're probably watching this video on a computer screen. Might be an iPad, a desktop, or even your phone, all of which are probably connected to the internet. These devices seem to be magic, displaying videos of cats or ordering products seemingly out of thin air. In reality, almost every single service we see and use today are backed up by underwater fiber optic submarine cables. Data, stored in large server farms across the world, isn't at light speeds over 1.4 million kilometers of underwater cables all around the globe, connecting everyone's devices. On average, 2.5 exabytes of information are sent each day. The invention of the first telegraph cable, which later developed into the submarine cable, revolutionized the way we communicate and was a turning point in globalization and communication. These cables have had a long, nuanced history that all started from the early 1800s. Their humble beginnings have spiraled into what we now thank for the internet and almost all communication. The impact that these telegraph cables have had on both communication and the world cannot be understated. Our story begins in the UK in the 1800s. Two men, Charles Wheatstone and William Cooke, have developed a revolutionary new technology that will change the way we communicate forever: the telegraph. Utilizing a 5-pin system, they implement a rudimentary system across the Great British Railway, connecting faraway stations. Train scheduling can now be faster than the trains themselves. It truly rose to fame, however, when a murderer by the name of Hawley Harvey Crippen was caught after boarding a train. The telegraph was used to inform of his arrival to another station, and he left in handcuffs. This telegraph served as a proof of concept for one Samuel Morse across the pond in the United States. While he planned to create one in the 1830s, he had to wait for the economic depression to fade before asking Congress for funding. Eventually, with the help of colleagues, he created his own telegraph, connecting the Supreme Court in DC with the B&O Railroad in Maryland. Morse always believed in the capability of an underwater telegraph cable, even trialing a test in the New York harbor. While successful, it was quickly cut by a ship's anchor. This did not deter scientists, however, and Charles Wheatstone would create the Dover-Calais cable in 1850, the first underwater telegraph cable connecting Great Britain to France over the English Channel. The first attempt, with only a 14-inch thick copper wire, failed almost immediately, but it managed to generate massive amounts of publicity for the English Telegraph Company. The following year, Wheatstone was successful in re-establishing the link between the two countries, this time with a much thicker and reinforced cable. This new cable would become the precedent for future cables and lay the groundwork for even modern-day submarine cables. Following his success, businessman Cyrus Westfield began dreaming of a large telegraph cable that connects England to the United States. He started the Atlantic Telegraph Company and brought Samuel Morse on as a technical supervisor. With funding from both countries, Field began in 1857, with the ships HMS Agamemnon and the USS Niagara setting sail from Ballycarbery Castle in County Kerry on the southwest coast of Ireland. It broke on the first day, but was repaired and the ships continued. However, issues such as the cable snapping, losing over 300 miles of cable, or sudden flooding of our compartments pushed the project back for another year. In 1857, this time, both ships set off from the middle of the Atlantic, cutting the time in half. With the same problems at hand, they pushed on. Harsh storms battered the old warships. The heavy spools of cable tripped over on the open seas. 10 sailors were injured in the laying of the cables. However, on the 25th of June, the Agamemnon touched down at Valentina Island and the Niagara at Newfoundland, and the first transatlantic cable was established. On August 10th, the first message was issued across the line. Queen Victoria sent a message to the current US President, James Buchanan, wishing good fortune and hoping that the cable would bring the two countries closer together. While only 98 letters, the message took over 16 hours to send. This may seem inefficient, but considering that previous methods of communicating would require a month trip across the Atlantic, this message was cause for celebration. People celebrated on the streets. A 100-gun salute rang off on the 1st of September in New York, with festivities running into the night as fireworks lit up the sky. This success, however, would not last for long. The cable was doomed from the start. Waldman Whitehouse, a doctor by trade, argued with William Thomson, an actual electrical engineer. Thomson argued for a theory he coined the law of squares, where he believed that the signal strength would decrease over time, and thus argued for a thicker cable to protect and boost the signal. Whitehouse, however, was determined to save money, and convinced Field to use a thinner, cheaper cable. When the cable finally connected, Thomson used his own mirror galvanometer to precisely measure the signals coming through, while Whitehouse failed to use his own instruments to detect the messages. Whitehouse, determined to use his own listening devices, sent over 2,000 volts through the cable, damaging the insulation and adding to the decay of the cable. Eventually, the cable failed, the thin cable unable to protect it from the extreme environments that it lay, and Whitehouse was investigated and fired completely. After the failure of the first cable, the public generally lost interest, but this didn't deter Field. With some help from Thomas Brassey and John Pender, he raised enough money to attempt his second voyage. By this point, many of their cables had been submerged in the Mediterranean and the Red Sea. This experience had helped Field design his new cable. With 7 twisted strands of pure copper weighing over 300 pounds per nautical mile, coated with rubber, this new cable was designed to outlast the extreme conditions at the bottom of the ocean. For the project, Field hired Sir James Anderson and his ship, the SS Great Eastern, with a massive iron hull specially designed to hold 3 large spools of telegraph cables. The ship set off on the 15th of July, 1865. Laying over 1,000 miles, the ship was soon cut short on the 2nd of August when the ship lost the cable and it fell into the sea. With the Great Eastern returning to England, however, Field was not done. With the remaining 2 spools, he got more funding and once again set out with the Great Eastern. On the 13th of July, 1866, the SS Great Eastern set off again. This time, the project was a success, and the ship was able to make it across, establishing the second transatlantic cable. Following the great news, in August of 1866, many ships along with the Great Eastern set off to recover the lost cable by using a fishhook design on the bow, intended to try and fish the disconnected cable from the depths of the ocean. Using nautical maps and a lot of effort, the HMS Terrible and the grappler ship Albany managed to grab onto the cable, salvaging it. What seemed like a difficult task was accomplished quite simply. That is, until the cable slipped off the buoy in the middle of the night and it fell back into the sea. A rough back and forth was fought between the cable slipping, with the sailor even being thrown around when the cable disconnected and flung across the deck. This cable disconnected almost 10 times, falling off the buoy and back into the ocean. It took over 14 days for the SSS Great Eastern to finally recover the broken cable, and over 26 hours to reconnect it. Finally, on the 7th of September, the spliced cable was connected to create the third transatlantic cable. At the outbreak of World War I, the cables also played an important role. As one of the first modern battles where both sides had long-range technology, communication became not just a useful tool, but a powerful weapon able to turn the tides of war. On the battlefield, generals would pull out long strings of telegraph wires to communicate with the front. Encoded in Morse code, these messages would easily coordinate attacking certain locations. Intercepting them could also prove deadly.
If your communications fail, as the Russians did at the Battle of Tannenberg at the early days of the war in 1914, where all of their wireless operators had been killed or seriously injured, and so people who had had only basic training in wireless telegraphy were operating their wireless telegraphy sets. They knew how to send Morse code, but they didn't know how to encrypt it. That is, to use codes or ciphers to try and keep the message secret for as long as it needed to be. And so they sent out messages in the clear that's unencrypted. And the Germans were able to intercept it, read the battle plans, and realize what the Russians were going to do almost before they did it themselves.
Outside of battle, the telegraph cables were a vital part of connecting countries together. For the Allies, the All Red Lines served as the primary network to connect one another, running across the world from Japan to South Africa. Britain had emerged from this time as one of the major powers in telecommunications, and controlled most of the telegraph networks. Past that, the British had also tapped into the lines of the Central Powers, showing how information could be used as a potent tool. Nowadays, the effects of submarine cables are even more apparent. Over 750,000 miles of telegraph cables run throughout the world, funded by both government and private companies such as Google and Microsoft. Over 99% of the world's data travels through these cables, connecting the many continents of the world. Modern-day technology, such as lighter glass cables invented by Charles K. Cow, can boost transfer rates in newer cables like the Maria cable by Google up to 26.2 terabytes per second. That's over 4.8 million high-definition movies all at once. These cables connect the world together. Without this fast communication, foreign countries would remain isolated and disconnected. But now we are unified together as one through these cables for communication. From our technology, our scientific advancements, our biomedical discoveries, our economic benefits, the photos in the most hidden crevices of the internet, the websites that traffic more than 8 billion visits per day, all have benefited from the unsung heroes of the deep, the submarine cable.